and get to follow up on a conversation from the previous day. But I realized that Douwe had brought up something that I would like to hear more about when he talked about his response to days 1, 2, and 3. And this is particularly about the feelings that you had as a child about Jesus because of the way you were taught. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And long after that too.
Yes. And I hear of many people who have to overcome those things in order to do what is asked when Jesus asks us to accept him.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well. Yes. At quite a young age, I can't remember when it started, but I grew up in a very religious home, Protestant religious, and the worst form of Protestantism is Dutch Reformed. Yes, felt a bit bad about saying that, but
Wow.
yes, so we had to go to church every Sunday. We just had to, and to Sunday school and so on. And right from the beginning, I just had a feeling at a very deep level that something doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I had a natural curiosity, so I would ask, and I would constantly ask questions of my father. Who is this God, and where does he come from, and how big is he? Why can't I see him? and so on. And then gradually got to this idea of love. God is love. But then this God of love has the need to actually kill his son, to have his son killed, and we call that love. And at a deep level, I couldn't always really intellectualize it, well, express it properly, but I just felt something was wrong. And also, my family was still quite patriarchal. So my father was the head of the home. Everybody had to listen to him. And when he decided something was right or wrong, then it was right or wrong.
Yes.
Even though I didn't always agree with it at all. And always this idea, but this is love. And somehow, Jesus was part of this complot, because he accepted it, and he died for our sins. But then, when we are born, we were told in church that we were born in sin, conceived in sin. I can't remember the exact
Original
words.
sin.
But yes, the original sin. But how can that be? Some man and some woman did something just because she ate an apple in a garden somewhere. Now, I have to suffer because of that.
Yeah.
So it's at a very deep level. It sat with me all the time, and then much later, when I did A Course in Miracles, I was right for A Course in Miracles at that stage. I was very intellectual, and I really took to it, and it's made a lot of sense, and especially the idea that Jesus didn't come to die for our sins. Well, I suppose in some way you could interpret that, but he came, as A Course of Love said, to end suffering, and as he says there, he did not suffer, because in the deeper sense, at the stage of consciousness that he was, he did not suffer. So it made a lot of intellectual sense to me, but at an unconscious level, and this is something I saw all around me too, and a lot of, especially Afrikaans people, leaving the church. And many of them still had a need to go somewhere and have some sort of religious experience, but quite a few also became completely atheist and very vitriolic, basically, against religion, a bit like Richard Dawkins. And I wonder whether there's not the same kind of thing, maybe. This intense anger and hatred towards anything that even smells of the supernormal. So on the one hand, I could relate to that. On the other hand, I had a feeling, no, but what Jesus said was actually, I could relate to that. That made sense. The whole idea of forgiveness, letting go of judgment, and so on. So I got to a stage where I thought I'd resolved all that. I'd read A Course of Love several times, and it was about the 5th or the 6th time, I can't remember, I read days 1, 2 and 3 again. And when I read day 1, I suddenly got this intense feeling here. I hate you!
Wow.
It came to the surface. Yeah. This, you fucking confused me all my life.
Yeah.
And I had to live with that, and all this anger against Jesus and the church and God and everything came up. And I had to be with that for a while. And I blogged about it too, which accidentally landed on my own timeline instead of the Course of Love site. But I can even feel it now. As I got in contact with that, I could feel the healing happening. I had to get in contact, like with so many other things, with that deep feeling of hatred and resentment and basically confusion, I think, which I saw in so many people around me too, coming to the surface. And it kind of inspired me, because I can so relate to so many people that I know who have this anger towards religion, and as a result of that cannot see anything spiritual or cannot actually get in touch with themselves. So yes, that was a very important one, and I realized that without that getting in touch with that intense hatred towards Jesus and God, I would not get to the place of acceptance. And only after going through that and really going through an intense experience from day 1, I then read day 2, which is accept myself. And I realized how closely the two were intertwined. Because basically, I think in both days he says, accepting me is the same as accepting yourself. Which of course boils down to the Christ in us.
Yes.
And it was, I'd already worked through day 2 a lot before, because of all the pain and stuff I'd experienced in my life, and the regret and guilt, especially around the death of my son. So I'd gone through that, but it was as if when I'd worked through day 1, accept me, Jesus or Christ, or it's not always very clear to me. When I could get through that, it was much easier to accept myself as a spiritual being, as a manifestation of Christ, basically. And that then opened the door to abundance. In fact, all this happened, I don't know, 2 or 3 months before I came to America.
Wow.
Because then I could start understanding abundance. Because as the Course of Love says, abundance comes from knowing God. I could not know God before dealing with all the emotional stuff that was actually blocking my contact with God. So yes, days 1, 2 and 3 stand out in my
They would, yes.
in my experience,
And so you'd read it many times, and maybe, did you feel uneasy with one before and just sort of ignored it, or did you? Do you remember?
I'm not sure what happens. I think that I thought I understood. But it's. And sometimes I don't realize. I think, oh yes, makes sense. But it's all here. And it takes some sort of trigger somewhere to bring up the deeper stuff, and then, as it says, then it becomes a wholehearted understanding. Before it was just an intellectual idea.
Yes. So it's a great example of how we have to feel it.
Very much.
And have to feel it all the way. Because it's like, one of the things I've learned is if I withhold anything, if I keep a piece of anything to myself, I'm not all available, It's like, so, and, there were things that I had to kind of let go in order to be fully available for true relationship, And so that's part of, that when you let something come out of you in that emotive way, whether it's tears or anger or whatever, the letting go happens, doesn't it? Yeah. Wow.
And I think that was also, it's part of the whole thing. My anger against religion in general is, you must be nice. I felt more genuine this time than yesterday. Concept was not genuine. I was aware of this having to be myself.
Yesterday, more so,
Yesterday,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now I must be myself more.